Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. On this episode, Rama Bijapurkar talks about her latest book, Lilliput Land. Rama, of course, is a well-known thought leader on the subjects of market strategy and consumer behavior. She's also the author of several books, the latest of which is called Lilliput Land, How Small is Driving India's Mega Consumption Story. In this book, Rama explores the challenges and paradoxes of India's market opportunity. Is the Indian consumer conservative or experimental? How did a developing country become the largest consumer economy in the world? Can supply create its own demand? We'll explore all these questions and more as we get ready to melt with Rama Bijapurkar. Rama, welcome to Melt. Congrats on your latest book, Lilliput Land. Now, your book is divided into three sections: the consumer India structure story, the consumer behavior story, and the supply side story. Is this one of the first times you've explored the supply side of the consumer story?
Absolutely. Firstly, it's fantastic to be here. If you had told me 10 or 12 years ago that I would include supply in my books, which are aggressively the people view, the consumer view of the world, I would have absolutely said there's no way I would have done it. But I think in those days I was battling the theory that if you build it, they will come. And so it doesn't, so all you need to do is get supply. Over the years, I found that people are ready, the consumer is way ahead of the supplier, and we don't have the right kind of supply available, at least big supply. So I thought that this time we had to look at supply because supply is inhibiting consumption because the consumer is ready, willing, waiting, and the supplier is saying, let the ugly duckling become the beautiful swan. I only want the rich consumer. I'll think about it. So that's really why I decided to include supply.
It's been over 30 years since liberalization in 1991, and you're saying supply is still a constraint. Why is that?
It was not a constraint in between. I think when you look at somewhere in the mid-90s or the late towards 2000, there was this big thing about the great Indian middle class, and everybody invested so much in supply. And we used to joke in those days that you will get a 2-bedroom flat free if you buy a television set. But so everyone thought, we've overestimated demand, and so demand became the bogey, and everybody said there's not enough demand. And in my book also, I quote a line from the serial Friends where she says, I was so busy trying not to become like my mother, I ended up becoming like my father. So we're so busy looking at demand and saying demand has to justify investment. And I think supply in between also, so supply then didn't have enough conviction, I think, behind demand. In between, Indian supply decided they were going to go abroad. If you remember those years where everybody went, leveraged the Indian balance sheets, went abroad on a buying spree, came back when things got a little bit difficult. In the meanwhile, the Indian consumer had become a little richer than the mid-90s when the great Indian middle class hype happened. But I think in terms of mindset, we still don't like our income demographics, and we don't like, we're not prepared for our consumption. That's why we're so surprised when the sea link gets crowded, or we're so surprised when we can't, people are flying and we can't enter airports.
One of the things you say in your book, and I quote, MNCs, especially from the West, have not done well in India. So, Rama, in simple terms, why haven't they done well? We have a huge demographic. We clearly have a need and a demand, and they have the supply. It seems like a match made in heaven.
Actually, no, because we are a large economy of lots and lots of modest income people. If you look at Europe or the US or the developed markets, they are large economies of relatively fewer people who are rich. Our top 10% may be just above the poverty line of America in terms of income levels. So there are quite a few reasons why multinationals haven't done well. One is definitely their business economics, which have been developed for another part of the world, a richer part of the world, just don't transfer well here. As we all know, at those kinds of margins, who can afford it? Even though we do buy 100 Lamborghinis, and that's the big news story going on, but I think that our economics are not conducive. Secondly, it's a question of worldview as well. Multinationals believe that if it happened elsewhere, it will happen here. There is a uniform pattern of evolution in the world, whereas actually there's not. And then I think the more important point is that a lot of MNCs believe that they're looking for extension markets. I already have the business model, I already have the R&D, I already have the products, I already have the know-how. So how much more can I get? I call it market for my strategy as compared to what's the strategy for this market. So if you already have it and you're sweating the assets you have, then you're quite happy for whatever incremental you get. And I think that's roughly the worldview that they come with.
Now, since 91, many MNCs, like you said, have come to India. Quite a few have left India as well, but some of them did stay on. And some of them have done really well for themselves. McDonald's comes to mind readily, where they priced for India and presumably doing pretty well in India. Other than pure pricing, what distinguishes the successful ones in India?
If you look at Hyundai and LG or Samsung, particularly the Korean multinationals, if you look at a Maruti Suzuki, one is the willingness to make for India. So are you making for India? Are you ready to bring in the latest price performance products that you actually have? So are you willing to bring in a frost-free refrigerator or a state-of-the-art air conditioner and willing to engineer it to prices that make sense here? So I think those that have found the magical price performance point, as compared to those who say, oh, this is an unevolved market, that's another multinational theory of evolution. This is an unevolved market, so let's not give them the latest. Or you're looking at the wrong metrics. Or when will the PC penetration in this market increase? Whereas the market's already gone towards mobile. I mean, the first point of entry for most computers is the mobile phone. So as a result of this, the ones that have come ready to make for India, ready to leverage the core competence they have elsewhere and make for India, and in a sense who come in humility, I think they do well.
Okay.
Those that come with, C.K. Prahalad had a lovely article called The End of Corporate Imperialism. And he said that while multinationals may want to change emerging markets forever, the reverse is also true. So I think those that don't come wanting to transplant or even translate global strategy, but are willing to create for India, I think do well.
A good example of that would be Kellogg's making upma instead of trying to convince us to eat cereal, or is that just anecdotal and for fun?
That's a good example of how it took them 25 years to say that we will, kicking, screaming, make you eat breakfast cereal, when we are already cereal at breakfast eating as a culture. I mean, we eat rotis, we eat idli, we eat dosas, we eat all that stuff. And then they tried the mango flavor, and then, of course, they did a lot of other good stuff as well. But why does it take so many years to say,
it seems like
let's
common
try
sense,
upma?
Rama. If you're going to come to India that eats idli and upma and puri, sell idli and upma and puri. It doesn't seem like rocket science. It doesn't seem like you need armies of management consultants to figure this out. So why then are MNCs, in some sense, consumer blind or tone blind, or are just not reading the market correctly?
It's a worldview. It's a worldview that says there is a uniform pattern of evolution, that as you get richer, you will eschew your traditional foods and you will start, that it is very aspirational for everyone to eat Kellogg, that as you get richer, you will get busier. And as you get busier, you will have perforce to move to cereal, breakfast cereal. But as people get busier now, we can buy the idli mao. I think you also underestimate what local competition is doing. I mean, honestly, until Indigo Airlines gave us all that ready-to-eat poha and all that, there wasn't any. Can you believe that?
There's a particular line from your book I want to quote when talking about the way management consultants understand India. You said they've changed their tune from happened elsewhere will happen in India to India is different. This seems also fairly basic to me, that India is different, but so is China, and so is Russia, and so is Portugal, and so is every other country in the world. Why then would they hang on to this view that India will go the way of the West, or India will follow the model that the Western world is followed?
But Suresh, everybody did at that time. Today, with hindsight, and also today, the world is not as aggressively global. Remember the days of the borderless world and the flat world, and how everybody in the world was exactly the same, give or take a little bit. Today, even the latest academic literature around globalization, people like Pankaj Khemawat and so on and so forth, are really talking about there being differences. In the old days, if you remember, there used to be this famous consulting chart that had per capita income on one axis and consumption of everything on the other. And I used to think that as we get richer, would we consume more Coca-Cola, or would it be that we need more toilets per capita outside the home before you give your child a drink of Coke, right? Or have any
What's
yourself?
the everything everywhere all at once? Do we need both of those at the same time?
Well, we ended up drinking water, but very, very sparingly, even if our toilets per capita, you try and take a road trip if you're a woman and it's really tough street. But it was not so apparent that the pattern of evolution would be different, because China evolved a little more the way the West did. But I always say that they're like a new hire in a company. We're like an experienced hire. We come with our own baggage. So India is a great teacher. I think the consumer India has just dug in its heels and said, my way or the highway. But I'm willing to evolve if you offer me value. But the way we process value is different.
What are the other reasons that India is a supply constrained market?
If I were to say it somewhat less than politely, I think people are saying that when I can kiss the prince directly, why do I have to kiss the frog, which is the modest income consumer, in the hope that he will become a prince later on. So I think as rich India continues to get a little richer, you may as well stay and serve the top 20%. So for example, in India, a small percentage of a large number is a large number. So in my book, I even talk about how the top 20%, if you were to think about
It's
them as
bigger
a
than many
country,
countries,
right?
yeah.
I've often been asked, as my business advisor, would you advise me to go and deal with the modest income consumer? And I say to them that if you don't serve the modest income consumer, you're missing out on a growth story. And mass markets like Time and Tide don't wait for anybody. Somebody else is going to come, and that's why you have such fabulous small supply.
According to your book and according to various studies as well, private consumption is at $2 trillion in 2023. Now, if we could magically remove these supply constraints in India, what do you think the number would be, say, in 3 years' time?
If you had the relevant supply that stimulates demand, in order to get to the 5 trillion, 6 trillion, or what Goldman Sachs says we're going to track at the third largest economy and so on, you need the consumption side to sing. So I would say even to get there, you need it, because it's not just about consumption, right? You will have consumption when people have income. You will have income when people are investing in this market and creating economic activities. So the whole thing is a good cycle. So to meet our aspirations, you need consumption to take off.
And will supply create its own demand in a sense?
Today, there is underserved consumers. There are lots of needs and pain points that are not served. Think about how we buy stuff from Amazon. I mean, I have a 13-and-a-half-year-old dog that's sleeping on a marble floor. I'm not going to rip out the marble floor. It's terrifying. But on the other hand, now that I know from Amazon that there are gym mats that I can put together and make corridors in the house of mats, I've gone and bought it. It is problem solving. I didn't know that I wanted the gym mat, but I know that I needed to do something to solve my problem. Similarly, the electricity situation, it just doesn't get better. And all of us have homes with lots and lots of gadgets. The richer you are, you have second homes as well. And if someone could actually have proper supply of not just solar but just inverters, I mean, maybe 4 or 5 solutions that really make sense, then I think you would obviously go in and do more of it. Today, think about it. How many times have you wanted to go to dinner in a high-end restaurant and spend money and not have a reservation available? How many times have you wanted to go on vacation and not found vacation space available? Airfares soaring. I mean, they're soaring because there is far greater demand than there is supply. Again, if you look at affordable housing.
And yet we have airlines shutting down.
We have airlines shutting down, and we also have airlines that are, and airports that are so chock-a-block full.
Yeah, it's ironic
Because
that we have
if you
both of these
miss
at the
the
same
price, if you get the price point right, everybody wants to fly. So the consumer behavior is the least problematic piece.
Okay. Now let's talk about suppliers. Your book says India has about 30,000 small-scale brands and about 3,000 brands in the large-scale sector. What does this kind of structure imply for me?
First of all, calculate your market share properly. Don't look at market share based on 5 people exactly like you. Or I hear a lot about, oh, we are category creators and we're category captains. I mean, you're not a category creator if you don't take into account the rest of the stuff that's being bought to serve the same need in the same categories. Secondly, to stop saying organized and unorganized. In the old days, we used to say unorganized. But today, if you look at a lot of people who are on selling stuff on Insta and so on, they're far from unorganized. They're actually quite organized and quite settled. They're just small. We wish they were bigger, but they're just small. So my advice to CMOs would be that the small sector is actually getting more agile, more nimble, more customer oriented. And so you will have greater and greater trouble proving value to the consumer. So please take a look at them and learn from them.
Most marketers I speak to say that these small guys are too small for us to take cognizance of, from chocolate to snack bars to skincare products. It seems, I keep hearing the words prestige, mass. Do these terms mean anything to you?
In India, we all buy everything at all kinds of price points. We're great balancers. In my book also, I tell the story of how if you own a car, you also are most likely to own a two-wheeler. There's a huge overlap. But if you own a car, you will buy a low-end two-wheeler. If you don't own a car, you'll buy a high-end two-wheeler.
That's a fascinating example.
Right?
Because in one case, the two-wheeler is a signifier of status. In the other case, the two-wheeler is a functional item.
Yeah, it's a workhorse. And similarly, we're great balancers and we will balance this and we will balance that. But this prestige, the reason I've spent so much time being practically anal about income data in the book is because I want to force us to engage with the fact that we're a large economy of very modest income people and embrace that modest income. So when you say prestige, it's a very supply-oriented phenomenon. And I keep asking, who buys prestige? Who buys prestige? Can you show me? And then the answer is personas. But it's not 2 or 3 or 4 people that you made up in your head. I mean, where are they in the universe that we actually have?
Another term that you seem unconvinced about in your book is modern retail or so-called modern retail. Why are you so skeptical about this term?
Oh gosh, I seem to have been quite rude in my book.
I'd say you're a bit skeptical about management consultants, though you say you're not, and about the term modern retail.
I love management consultants. I call it so-called modern retail because once upon a time, including a report that a very large management consultant put out that was called The Dawn of the Super Retailer, that said that very soon modern retail supermarkets are going to take us over. Fact is, Kirana survived, Kirana thrived, Kirana did better because Kirana, benefit minus cost, did a better job for us than modern retail. So the idea of modernity being attached to it makes you wonder whether modern is more value adding, whether modern is a better way of doing things. And I think Kishore Biyani once upon a time said that why should I be shopping in straight aisles neatly labeled on both sides when that's not the way I shop? Whereas if you ask me, some of the marketplaces we have online are Crawford Market on the net and that works much better. So the idea of modernity coming from form and a form that's borrowed from somewhere else was why I put the term so-called to it.
You brought up Kishore Biyani. Now, there are multiple ways of slicing and dicing the Indian consumer. You yourself have created a format in your price think tank, this Kishore Biyani, who says it's not rich and poor, it's India 1, 2, 3 and maybe India 4. What's a simple rule of thumb to understand how to segment consumers in these brackets?
Firstly, understand why you're looking at them. If you want to see who's how rich, go away. The reason I put multiple versions is firstly to show that no matter which way you choose to hold your nose, there are large numbers of people who are very modest in income. And so while you may yen to be a very, very rich country, in actual fact, you're not. So one is to say that whichever thing that you espouse, that's really the way it is. I would say just go with percentiles, the top 10%, the next 10%, the next 10%, and figure out where you actually want to focus, because it depends on your cost positions as well as it depends on what margin volume game you really want to play. So this aspirer, striver is nice language, but it does not come out of a scientific basis of an attitude orientation. It's not, to be a little technical, it's not like there's been an attitude-based cluster analysis done to throw up these clusters. And when you say, and one man's, as I've shown in the book, one man's aspirer is another man's striver. So instead of all of us having many, many different versions of whatever we want it to be, let's just keep it simple and let's just say top 10%, next 10%. It is what it is and deal with it.
And with that, it's a wrap on Melt today. Although this episode ends here, we'll continue our conversation with Rama next week. Keep following Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, I'm @Suvenk on X. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.